Okay, now we're moving into a section about coaching, training, mentoring and counselling. All about developing our staff in one way or another. And there are many different ways of doing so. But why should we do it? Why would we do it? I mean, we can see why it's good for them, but does it bring any benefit to us as well? Well, it does. Because as we saw in an earlier diagram, whilst we can work as hard as we can, if our people are doing all sorts of different things, our team is only going to achieve so much. Whereas if we invest more in our team, they are going to pull in a more united way, and probably in a stronger way, and as a team we will achieve more. And so if your boss is looking at not just your personal performance, but the performance of your team, then it is important to be developing our team so that they are growing stronger and are more able to deliver the objectives that your team has committed to. Now, of course, there are many different ways in which we can go about training and mentoring or counselling or coaching or whatever it might be. Some of these things are much more short term, some are very long term. Some are formally designed, some are much more informal and just flow. Some are led by life experience, others are led by a more theoretical expert. Some are seeking to address a particular problem, whereas others are just looking for a much more broad transformation. Some are led by the participant, some are participant taking the lead, and some have the participant as following. And actually, when you look at any kind of training, you can try and plot where it fits. So, for example, the original Ignite course, it took 2 years to run through. It was a long-term thing. It was clearly a formally designed process with a curriculum that we carefully worked through. It was led more by a theoretical edge rather than an experiential one. It was definitely seeking specific solutions to particular problems, and on the whole, the participant followed the curriculum. Whereas there are other ways of developing our staff. It doesn't have to be through a formal course. In fact, for many things, a formal course is not the best way. Actually, other ways may be much more suitable to develop our staff. So I'm going to show you another one of these, one that's called the Coach method. The Coach method is very different from the original Ignite course. It's much more short term. It tends to be focused on possibly even just 1, 2 or 3 meetings with the other person. It tends to be much more informal and a flowing experience to it. It's kind of led not out of a position of excellence, but more out of a position of experience. It is still seeking specific solutions, but it is much more led by the participant. There is no curriculum, as it were. And in fact, this is one of the key thoughts in the coaching method, is that the participant needs to lead through it. So, how do we deliver it? Well, in the coaching method, the underlying philosophy of it is that people can find their own solutions. We just have to help nudge them in the right direction, ask the right questions, and ideally people will find their own solutions. If we allow the participant to find their own solutions, they are much more likely to then buy into it. They will value these solutions because they thought of it and they know that it has a higher chance of working. And ideally, it will lead to a process of their growing in maturity and growing in confidence, which we can see as a transformation. And so our role in the coaching method is to help them discover the truth that is there, because the truth will set them free. It's not our job to be the clever, wise one who gives them the solutions. and the answers, even though they might want those solutions and answers. In the coaching method, there are kind of three kind of components to it. One is this idea that there is inspired truth to be had out there. And sometimes we, as the coach, we can tap into that truth. Maybe through prayer, talking with the Holy Spirit. Maybe just by opening up our imagination. Sometimes we can tap into this inspired truth that is there. That then has to be combined with a process of discovery, where the person is really trying to figure out, well, what is the problem? How could a solution look like? They then have to take some sort of action, and there has to be a sense of reinforcement. So we might talk about that as being sort of like positive feedback. If truth is combined with this process of putting it into us, it will result in transformation. That is the sort of the essence of the coaching method. The coaching method begins with a need to listen. The coach has to be listening very carefully. And this is one of the things that actually makes the coaching method quite difficult for many of us, is that it does require intense listening skills, listening with your mind. So you're not just listening to their words, but you're also listening in the silences, in the gaps. You're listening to what is being said and what is not being said. You have to listen with your whole body. You have to look like you're listening. You have to be interested in the other person so that they really feel confident to share with you what they're thinking and feeling. You have to also listen with your words, which means that sometimes you have to paraphrase what they have said. They may say X, Y, Z, and you say, well, let me get this right. Just to check I've understood. Are you talking about X, Y, and Z? Yes. Okay, good. So you're helping them to see that you really are engaging in this. And you can sometimes ask questions of clarification, questions that help them think in new ways. But you really shouldn't finish their thoughts for them. You really shouldn't come up with solutions for them. You should let them do the talking and you do the listening. We also need to listen with our intuition, because sometimes there will be things that they do not say and that they want to keep to themselves, maybe for various reasons. And we also need to be aware that the Holy Spirit may be speaking into this situation as well. So the coaching method works through these 5 different phases in order to, within every coaching session, you will work through these 5 phases. And they always start with the first one being connect. In connect, it's all about just reconnecting with them and saying, hey, how are you doing? Where are you up to? It's checking out their context. Things may have changed since you last spoke to them. It's engaging them, re-engaging their mind into this conversation that maybe we have started somewhere else and we're bringing back. It's about building rapport and trust with them and showing that you really are listening, you are really caring for them, and you're not going to go sharing that with other people. That this is a confidential time for them to grow. Maybe in this time of connecting, if there was a previous session, this would be an appropriate point to talk a little bit about how did it go last time? The things that you've worked on since we last met, how has that gone? Has that been successful? Have you talk to me about how that has gone? And if things were not a success, if there were things where it comes out, no, they actually felt that it was a bit of a failure, well, can we break it down? Can we analyze what was wrong, what went wrong, and were there some bits that did go right? Maybe it's not a complete failure. Maybe it's a bit of a mixed story. So after we've gone through this phase of connecting, the next stage is to then look at outcomes. So thinking, what is it that you are hoping to achieve from today's session? Not you, the coach, them. What is it that they want to achieve? And don't go presuming anything. Sometimes we kind of assume, oh, we know that they're in a particular situation. We know that they've got this challenge. Of course, that is what they want to solve. Not necessarily. We have to take it to them and say, what do you want out of this session? We then move into a phase of awareness raising. Now this is a discovery stage, and your role as the coach is to ask a whole lot of questions to help draw out from them what is going on. What is the background to the problem that they're wanting to address, or the issue that they're wanting to explore? And it's not that you become more aware and that you gain more information. It's not that you're asking questions so that you can know the answers. The point of asking the questions and the point of all this awareness phase is that they become more aware of the issue. Because yes, they are living in that issue, but they may not be fully aware of everything that's going on. Sometimes we're not completely aware of the situations we're in. So you asking very pointed questions can sometimes help them to see, oh, that's true. Oh, I don't know. It's not just about asking questions. There can also be some dialogue, bouncing back and forth, where you're maybe trying to understand their motivations as well as the details of the situation. Once this awareness phase is over and you have helped them to really see what is going on and what are the issues, you then want to start thinking about a course of action. Again, you don't give them the solution, you get them to brainstorm. What could you do about this? Think of 5 different things that you could do. Brainstorming, where no answer is wrong. It's about coming out with all sorts of different possibilities. It may be that you have a suggestion that they don't come up with, and in which case you might have to say, now go on, I've asked you to think of 5, I want you to think of another 5. But ideally, they should come up with the suggestions. If you've got an idea and you think, oh, come on, why don't you just think of that one? You have to just keep asking questions until they think of it. But you can't just tell them the answer. And then get them to say, well, okay, which one are you going to choose? And how are you going to do it? How are you going to put this into reality? How can you see this not move from being a potential solution to being a something that you are actually going to act on? What are you going to do? And it may be that you need to make it really smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound, to really pin it down. What are you going to do before our next session? And it's not just what could you do. That's where you start off. You then move on to what do you want to do? And then ideally you bring it all the way through to, okay, what will you do? That's the kind of the mental process that you're wanting to go through. And then as you're drawing the session to a close, you pull out some highlights. Okay, what are the main takeaways from we've been talking about? You are going to do this, this, and this. What are you going to bring back to the next session and show me? So you're kind of really making them kind of accountable to follow through on this. So that is the essence of the coaching method. And of course, it's a lot of it revolves around different questions. And questions, they have to be for their benefit, not for yours. As I said earlier about the, like in the awareness raising phase, it's not that you become more aware of the situation. Actually, you don't need to know the situation. They need to know the situation. So all of the questions that you ask are helping them to see the issue more clearly. You're helping them to move forward. It's not about you discovering more or for you to have oh my goodness, look at that, you could do it like this. That is irrelevant. It's about them moving forward. So be careful that you don't allow this time to stray into becoming a counselling session where you are giving them counsel. You should not be the one to be giving answers. But actually all the questions that you ask ideally should be open-ended questions where they can then talk and they can sometimes ramble, they can explore, they can inquire, they can move forward in where you're trying to bring them. They also need to be open questions. Now, what are some good open questions? Things like, tell me about a time, tell me about a situation, or how will you do this? How will you handle this situation next time it comes up? How do you feel about such and such? These are the kind of open questions. What would you do about this if this would be happening? So, our questions, we've said they need to be for their benefit, not for yours. They need to move them forward, and they need to be open questions. And you have to also be careful that you don't ask questions which appear to be judging or accusing them in any kind of way. How do we avoid accusing and judging questions? Well, a simple one is, instead of asking, why, why did you do that? Why did you think that was a good idea? These are obviously accusing kind of questions. Instead, use a question something like, which factors did you consider when you made this decision? What did you bring into your decision-making process? Or maybe you could say, how would you summarize your approach to this situation? Or something like that. But be careful of asking why, because why can sometimes come across as a little bit of a judgment call. And as we said, we want to avoid those judging questions. And lastly, your questions need to come from different perspectives. They are coming to you because you have sharp questions. That is what makes a good coach. Somebody who knows how to ask the right questions. So, what perspectives are you going to bring into this equation? Some different perspectives. It could be that you think about the background of it. You could be asking about potentially underlying issues. You can't just say, are there underlying issues? Because they don't, they haven't thought about that. But maybe you can ask some questions which maybe dig about in that background a little bit. It could be that you ask questions that you come from a perspective that's focused on the results. You could be saying, well, all right, this is clearly an issue for you. What might success look like? When this was if this is changed at some point in the future, what might success look like? It could be that you bring in some spiritual angle into this issue. So what do you feel God is saying in all of this? It could be that you bring in some cultural issue. Maybe you can approach this from looking at the societal norms for this particular situation. Maybe see it from a different cultural perspective. Maybe that you can bring in some systemic view and thinking, well, what are the other factors that are at play that are involved in this process that you are engaged in? It may be there's some wisdom or something from the Bible that you could bring in, asking them about maybe some guidance that they might want to receive about this particular issue. It could be that you bring in a perspective of focusing them on inner change, rather than very often we want solutions that will solve the outer world, but actually the problem, or another way of addressing the problem, is to look at it from the inner world and say, well, how do you need to change so that you're better able to cope with this situation? Or it could be that you bring in something about a strategy from outside and thinking, well, what are the steps that you need to take? You obviously know what you need to do. You know what you're wanting to do. What are the steps to get there? What is the process that you're going to take? And you could approach it as if you were, trying to plan a campaign of how to address this issue. So you as the coach, it's about bringing some pointed questions and helping them to find the solutions for themselves. And that is not as easy as it sounds.